Grigory Gusakov and Anatoly Kornev, both age 10, tiptoed through the dark, deep woods bordering their quaint Russian village of Obrechenye. The year was 1990, a turbulent time for the people of Russia, seeing as the Soviet Union was on the precipice of collapse. But for these two young boys, global geopolitics was the last thing on their minds. They were too busy hunting for the legendary monstrous witch, known only as Baba Yaga. For those in our audience who grew up in Eastern Europe, or those at least decently familiar with Slavic folklore and/or the John Wick film series, mention of the name Baba Yaga likely sends a slight chill down your spine. And if it doesn't, just wait. By the end of this video, you'll be afraid to go into the woods alone. Not that going with others would save you, as poor little Grigory and Anatoly were about to find out the hard way. They forged on through those witchy woods. By our standards, the boys were tough and headstrong. After all, the Russian wilderness could be a brutal place to grow up, and in a town like Obrechenye, the old ways of stoicism and perseverance were prized over fear and caution. All except for one particular area, the supernatural. Like many small villages all over the world at every point in history, Obrechenye had its fair share of local superstitions. Chief among them was the belief that the local forest was enchanted, and that when people wandered in among the trees, many of them would never return. They would fall into the gnarled clutches of the carnivorous witch Baba Yaga, and their bones would lay among the roots and dead leaves until they someday crumbled into dust. It was starting to get dark out. When the two boys had first set off, it had been with the intention of proving their mettle among the other local children. They didn't fear Baba Yaga. The old witch in the woods was just another fairy story meant to frighten children, and they weren't children anymore, though they would never live to be men. It wasn't long before they were beyond the point of no return. Which way was out and which way was further in? It hardly mattered anymore, as carrion birds cawed far above. The bravado that put them here was starting to falter now, but neither dared show it. They'd rather be put in mortal peril than show fear in front of one another. Was something moving in the distant shadows? A thin, twisted human figure, impossible to make out save for the faint glow of its eyes in the gathering dark. They couldn't tell what was real, and what was their mind playing cruel tricks on them. A hoarse whisper issued through the brittle trees in the moments that followed. It was an ancient voice, a voice that had echoed in the nightmares of generations, a voice that had seen centuries. It spoke in an older Russian dialect that neither of the young boys could understand, but somehow, the essence of its message still rung clear in their hearts and minds.
Welcome, little children, to my forest. Here your lives are forfeit. You are my property. I look forward to chewing the tender meat of your young bones.
That was all they needed to hear to start running. Grigory and Anatoly turned and fled, screaming for help into the darkness of the forest. Both gasped as they ran through what seemed to be a giant spiderweb. They spat and spluttered, trying to swat away the silky strands as they ran from the voice. Little did they know, what they'd just run through was no spiderweb. They tried to press on, but their footsteps slowed. The forest was changing around them, twisting, shifting, sparkling. What had seemed terrifying before was suddenly, oddly, beautiful. The two boys just stood and watched as the forest turned into a gorgeous Technicolor light show, unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Strange figures hopped and danced through the foliage. One tall figure approached them out of the trees, a beautiful, fair-haired maiden. The two boys were entranced by her, their hearts filled with pure golden light. Why were they running before? They couldn't even remember. They just smiled as the woman approached them in her long, flowing dress, smiling back. She was like something out of a fairy tale. They didn't react. They didn't even realize what was happening as the jaws of the horrible, ancient old crone closed around their skulls for the last time. Grigory and Anatoly were never seen again. Just another two children gone missing in the woods. the latest entries on a long list of tragedies to hit the village of Obrechenyi, but they were also the straws that broke the camel's back. The villagers were sick of living in fear under the fabled witch. They would have their revenge. The men of the village gathered up their weapons and formed a hunting party. Guns, torches, knives, axes, and fury. They would slay the beast that had taken so many of their friends and their children in the woods. As soon as their forces were assembled, they charged into the forest looking for blood. With their numerical advantage and single-minded determination, it didn't take them long to find the monster in the woods. She was every bit as hideous and nightmarish as they had anticipated. A gnarled, snarling crone with long-clawed fingers and dirty fangs. They got her in their sights and prepared to open fire, but none of them were ready for Baba Yaga's counteroffensive. She moved like a leaf in a strong wind, swift and effortless. The men who'd made the mistake of getting too close to her with knives and axes tasted her terrible wrath. She tore through them with claws like iron, sank her fangs into their flesh, lifted and tossed them like rag dolls. How could she be so fast and so strong? The men were terrified. This was no mere woman. It was a true monster squeezed into a barely human form. By the time the creature was finally incapacitated, it'd taken countless bullets and strikes. How any creature could survive such an assault was unimaginable. Several members of the hunting party were dead by this point. Others had been overtaken by a strange form of madness. A couple of them had been given to constant giggling fits or were speaking long strings of nonsense. Others had been rendered entirely catatonic by the experience. It was clear that the witch had powers beyond their understanding. They needed to return it to the village and destroy it as quickly as possible. The monster was bound and dragged back to Obrechenyi. After seeing how it bewitched some of the men, they avoided direct contact whenever possible. They would do everything they could to see justice done. Of course, there would be no due process for Baba Yaga. The violence that had erupted in the forest was more than enough proof to justify the beast's immediate death sentence. The local priest gave a prayer, though he remarked that he was sure this monster was the creation and servant of the devil, and the execution commenced. A local used a blessed sword, anointed with holy water, to hack off the Baba Yaga's head. Its body was shot several times for good measure, and it was finally doused in gasoline and set on fire. The remains were buried just outside the village limits, hoping that the Baba Yaga's evil wouldn't continue to haunt their town, even in death. Isolated villages in the Russian steppe aren't famous for their communication with outsiders, especially back in 1990 when the Soviet Union was still clinging on to control and the internet was still in its infancy. It took a few weeks for news of a village capturing a so-called local witch to reach the SCP Foundation. After closely studying the peculiar disappearance records in the area, they sent over a detachment of field agents to investigate, and perhaps conduct a few interviews with the locals. They had no way of knowing there wouldn't be any left by the time they arrived. When the field agents reached Obrechenyi, it was already a ghost town. Not a single survivor was found, only the evidence of fresh carnage. Desiccated bodies were found in some of the village's houses, in others only body parts. A hole in the ground next to the village seemed to show evidence of some subterranean creature clawing its way back up to the top. Whatever this creature was, it clearly crawled back up from the earth and exacted bloody revenge against those who had buried it. Blood trails from some of the bodies leading back into the woods made it clear where the creature had fled to after massacring the entire village. Given the sudden increase in the situation's severity, Mobile Task Force Epsilon 6, aka the Village Idiots, were brought in to apprehend the fugitive witch. But much like the literal village idiots that had come before them, this MTF had no idea what they were up against. They entered the forest outside Obrechenyi with superior tactics and weaponry to the villagers, with orders to contain the creature at all costs. They didn't exactly know what they were searching for in the dark amongst the trees, but when the first operatives laid eyes on the twisted old crone, they almost reflexively relaxed their guard. For some of the village idiots, this would be the last mistake they ever made. Some of the operatives began to feel funny. Much like Grigory, Anatoly, and some members of the hunting party, they began to see the forest warping and shifting around them. They giggled at all the funny colors and sighed, feeling an overwhelming sense of calmness and euphoria. It was honestly the best they'd felt in years. Perhaps they were wrong about hunting the witch in here. Maybe the real anomaly here was a Russian forest that made you feel awesome when you stepped inside. While the affected agents were giggling away in their own little la-la land, Baba Yaga was bringing the pain. With the same freakish speed, strength, and ferocity that had surprised the hunting party weeks earlier, the witch was tearing through MTF Epsilon 6, ripping through hardened tactical armor with her long claws and teeth. She took shot after shot, enough tranquilizer to put down an elephant, but she kept fighting. In the end, the training and numerical superiority of the task force won out. They were able to secure and contain the Baba Yaga, soon redesignated SCP-352, and take it to a nearby Foundation containment site for further studies. There they officially recorded all the details, from the creature's incredible speed and strength to its regenerative abilities so extensive that it could even survive being decapitated and burned. But what about the hallucinogenic effects? Like a hungry spider, the Baba Yaga's true power comes in her ability to spin a deadly web. Her body is able to produce long, thin, hair-like fibers, each one coated in powerful hallucinogenic enzymes that induce a sense of placid, euphoric stillness in its victims. When it isn't engaging multiple targets, the creature can sometimes take multiple days to consume a single, still living victim, taking them apart and eating them piece by piece. Speaking of eating, as you can probably imagine, in order to keep SCP-352 uneventfully contained, it's ideal to make sure it isn't hangry. In order to keep 352 well fed, they need to stock up on its favorite food, human flesh. Though specifically, 352 has a real hankering for babies. While the Foundation are currently exploring anomalous means of keeping the Baba Yaga fed, until those means are fully ironed out, they need to keep this monster fed the old-fashioned way, only ever withdrawing food as punishment if it attempts to breach containment. After all, there's a very good reason why parents and children across the Slavic world fear Baba Yaga. She's always hungry, and in the end, she always gets what she wants. Now go check out SCP-3999, I'm at the center of everything that happens to me, and Waldo finds you, SCP-4885, find him for more of the most frightening anomalies out there.